the Legal Corner podcast series. Welcome to today's episode of The Legal Corner, a podcast which covers a variety of legal issues to keep you informed. Hosted by attorney at law Colin Dinoon and communications specialist Leonardo Torres.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Legal Corner podcast series. I am your host, Colin Dinoon, attorney at law, and I'm pleased to bring you another episode. My co-host, Leonardo Torres, won't be with us today as he has some matters of state to attend to, but I'm sure we are going to have fun nonetheless. In this, our fifth episode, our theme is Life at Oxford University. Now, the University of Oxford is one of the leading universities in the world. It has been ranked number one by Times Higher Education World University Rankings for the past 6 years. It attracts a wide array of students from all over the world who pursue both graduate and undergraduate studies at any one of the university's 36 colleges. An interesting point to note is that the AstraZeneca vaccine was developed as a result of work undertaken at the University of Oxford Jenner Institute and the Oxford Vaccine Group. On the show today, we have Mr. Samuel Bailey, attorney at law, who is going to share with us about his experience studying at the University of Oxford. Just to tell you a bit about Mr. Bailey, Samuel Bailey completed a Bachelor of Laws at the University of the West Indies, attaining several scholarships and awards. He was called to the bar as an attorney at law in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. Samuel worked as a judicial counsel at the Caribbean Court of Justice, assisting the Apex Court with a variety of disputes within the region. Throughout his studies, Samuel was involved outside the classroom, participating in several debates, moots, and academic competitions around the world, including the Prize Media Moot on behalf of Oxford last year. He has served in various positions of student leadership, most recently as president of the Law Students Association. Samuel has recently completed a master's in law at the University of Oxford and is currently studying for an MBA. He has a passion for international and commercial law and hopes to one day use these areas to contribute to the growth and development of the Caribbean region. Good day to you, Samuel, and how are you?
Good, Colin. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Legal Corner, man. Jumping right into it, tell us a bit about your academic journey before Oxford.
So before Oxford, most of my studies was in Jamaica. I did high school in Jamaica, and then I went on to the University of the West Indies. But one of those years, in the second year, I went to the University of the West Indies in Cayville. So I did that year in Barbados, which was an excellent year. I say over and over again that I think that it's necessary that we continue programs like that and establish kind of set ways for us to integrate better as Caribbean islands. I think that naturally, we have a very individualistic mentality in the Caribbean, which I think prevents us from getting the progress that we need. And so I thought that that program, specifically doing the LLB, where you could do that at Cayville and you have that mesh of so many different islanders getting together, it was really an amazing time. And I think that was crucial at a point of in my kind of academic journey that helped me to, develop and helped me to put a vision on what I wanted to do. After that, I returned to Jamaica. I did Norman Manley Law School for 2 years. And then after completing it, worked a bit and then moved to Trinidad, worked to the Caribbean Court of Justice in Trinidad, where they're headquartered. And then I got the Rhodes Scholarship. So then I moved to Oxford for the Masters in Law. So that's most of my academic, journey. It's been, as with everyone in academics, it's ups and downs. It's tough. It's in and out, but we're grateful for where it has carried us and hoping to finish it this year. I always say that this is the final time I'm studying, but apparently I don't know myself well enough to move to another. But I do hope that this is it, and then we start working after,
Yeah. I like the point you made about Caribbean integration because we actually met at Cayville And one
You
of the
know,
things I liked about cable was that whole idea of meeting persons from other islands, right? Because especially as regional students, when we go out there, we had to step out of our comfort zone. We couldn't just
yeah,
stick together, in my case with the Trinidadians or in your case the Jamaicans, but we were in class with persons from other islands and so on. And even if you were staying in hall, well, you will actually be living with persons from
yeah,
other islands. So it really forced you
exactly.
to, to engage
No,
and interact and
exactly.
integrate.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. We need it.
yeah,
We
no,
need it, especially living together. My time on Hall, that was excellent. Being on Sherlock and just the mix, having Trinis, having Antiguans, having St. Lucians, and just the different ways in which we prepare food, the different way we think about things, just different ways we
yeah.
describe things. For a while, you're
Different
trying to understand what
cultures.
exactly were they referring to. But it's amazing because you need the different perspectives in any context. You always benefit from a variety of experiences and exposure that helps you to have the best rounded view and look at issues the best. They can challenge your thinking, you can challenge theirs, and at the end, everyone gets to improve. It's not singular. It's for us as a group, as a region, to really get the best out of it. So I think it's one of the best things that we have that's still available, in a sense.
Most definitely. Now, I want to take you a bit back to your studies at Oxford. I know you'd have done a BCL. Can you tell us what does that
Yeah.
BCL program involve?
Sure. So the BCL is the Bachelor of Civil Law, which is Oxford's equivalent to the LLM, the Masters at Law. And what it requires is that in order to get into the BCL, you have to have that undergraduate LLB from a university over the anywhere in the world. And so you have people who come in from the Commonwealth that do that, coming from Australia, coming from some from the US. Caribbean wasn't as represented, but you have a couple of Africans as well and British people. Mostly that make up that population. But it was really good because you got to choose from about 30 different courses and build the kind of specialization that you wanted. So I built mine in international and commercial law, which specifically did two in international and two in commercial, doing conflicts of law, civil procedure on the commercial side, but also touching the international side with dispute settlements before international tribunals and courts, and also looking like at international law of the sea. So, and each person's BCL will look very different because you would rarely find someone who has all of the same four courses as another, because you just get to follow your interests and specialize the way you want it to. And that's the beauty of the program. But the teaching of the BCL really went through a series of seminars and tutorials, and Oxford is known for its tutorial structure where sometimes you're on a one-on-one with a professor, at most a three-on-one with a professor with students, and they really get to grill you and interrogate all the issues that you've kind of brought up and how you've written the paper, the writing style, how you research and so on. And it really kind of digs deep into you critically as a person and getting the most out of you. So it's really gruesome, but it's also very rewarding at the end.
I heard you mention that there aren't many Caribbean students at Oxford. So I want you to tell us a bit about what your experience has been as a Caribbean student studying at such a prestigious university.
Yeah. I mean, it at the beginning, it's very, very, it's quite a lot. It's quite a shock when you just come in and you really, rarely can find anyone that sounds like you, even looks like you in a lot of these cases, especially in the legal sphere. It's just so predominantly, British or white, and you might have some Americans or Australians, but it really is kind of made for them, made by them, kind of. So in that context, it can be quite shocking, and for a lot, it can be a lot to deal with because not only are you dealing with the academic pressures, but you're now dealing with kind of that assimilation into a culture and a place that really doesn't look like you and isn't anything that you recognize. The type of food that you're getting, the type of music that you're listening to, when they want to go out and the type of things that they do, it's just such a very different atmosphere and culture and vibe that you have to get into, and that can be a lot. And so for me, it was important to kind of find a community. So every single Caribbean person I met, even if they, you have some people who they're kind of more, their parents or their grandparents were from the Caribbean, but they hadn't even been to the Caribbean. I still met up with them and still spoke with them. At least they remotely understood a little bit about, the Caribbean and some of the things that we related to. And I found one friend here who's a DJ, for example, in Oxford, and he was from Jamaica, and he worked at a Caribbean restaurant and spent a lot of time at that restaurant, sometimes just playing dominoes with the Caribbean staff and so on. And they weren't necessarily like members of Oxford University, but at least they still gave me a community within Oxford. And you just have to look certain places. And I also found now students who, after a while, you realize, okay, this one is from Bermuda, this one is from Belize, and then these become your closest friends because you can all relate, whether it is around a meal, a movie, you talk about what happened on Caribbean Twitter today in the discussion or so on. But it really is necessary that you kind of have that support and that flexibility to be yourself in this environment.
Are your peers open to learning about the Caribbean? Do they validate your experience as a Caribbean person?
I think it depends on which peers you really speak to. You do have a good subset of the population who do try to get that variety of experience and they hear, but some of them, they've only been exposed to the Caribbean in a certain way. And so they only know, yeah, man, or they only think about like, tourism on this kind of context. And so their only way to connect is, wow, I went to Jamaica on a vacation and it was so amazing, seeing this. And so they don't really know Jamaica. They only know a white sandy beach, and that's all they can think about. Or even the connection that they have to Jamaica is they once went on a cruise that stopped in the Virgin Islands or in Antigua. And they're like, it's the same thing as Jamaica, right? All islands. Like they don't see that there's this big difference that they're culturally, economically, physically, even the features of the island, some of them don't think that far and they only have what's exposed to them, I guess, in news media or when they go on vacation, with their family. But you do have some of the population who are genuinely interested. And I think you kind of have to take your time seeking out the people who have that same kind of thinking. You learn more about them, and they learn more about you. And sometimes it comes without you recognizing because it's some people that you don't expect that actually are interested. But it's something you have to seek because other than that, a lot of them are just into this culture and being very isolated into their British way of thinking, and they're quite fine with that, not trying to expose themselves, and they're happy with that. So you definitely just have to be smart about how you navigate space and find those true people who are interested in it.
What about the African students? Is there any solidarity among African and Caribbean students?
Yeah, there is. So we have a society called the African and Caribbean Society, ACS, and that's something that we have kind of been integral in. Like, we've tried to come in with as much Caribbean perspective as possible because even with that, there's a lot of African influence, but not as much Caribbean influence. And that's just also by the numbers. There'll be way more people who are British Black students who their parents or grandparents are from Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, but you'd have way less that their parents are from the Caribbean. And so even with the representation, it's very, very low. And so then with that, it also means that they cater less for the Caribbean people if they're not actually, there. So recently, I think we had one of the largest Caribbean populations at an ACS event where when they split us up into like West Africa, North Africa, East, South, and also Caribbean, then we had the largest amount of people. But normally when it's just split African and Caribbean, then they would definitely hugely outnumber us. So it's about just trying to, I guess, get as much people present as possible. The more you make them feel welcome is the more they'll show up and they'll tell other Caribbean people that this is something. But they've been doing, I think, well recently with kind of having that merge of if we have an event, we play a little bit of Afrobeat music, but we also play some reggae, dancehall, soca as well, and so on. And it's been good to see that interaction because together we still are a very small population, which is, I think the numbers are somewhere maybe around 2%, 1 to 2% of the population of the entire Oxford is Black. So we really don't have enough people to be separating Caribbean from, we need to be together as a united front when we deal with certain issues. So yeah, we've been trying to develop that as much as possible.
Tell me a bit about race, because we've been alluding to it, but we haven't directly mentioned it. So I want to bring it out into the open and let us talk a bit about what role does race play in your daily interactions.
Yeah, I mean, just as anywhere, once it is a predominantly white environment, there are going to be issues of racism. And unfortunately, those kind of permeate all the spaces. So socially, you expect it because you can be excluded from certain social contexts just because of the color you're seeing. They're used to a certain skin color being there. It might go into sports as well. Last year I was the only black person in a predominantly white team. I think there were maybe two Asians on the rugby team as well, but overall, I was the only black person on the entire rugby team. I was also the only black person this year on the water polo team, and still am the only person. Are already just naturally without that representation. And so I think one of the important things is trying to see whether there's a difference between kind of being excluded or being integrated, or is it that just no one has ever gotten to it? Because already, as I said, if we're 1% of the population, what are the chances of that 1% having a good rugby player or having a good swimmer or having a good, polo player or whatever it is that the sport is? So it's not always that I think that maybe they're purposely being excluded. Sometimes it's just that we may not have somebody that's there, and you might end up being the first black person to ever really join an Oxford team of this sort. What is important is thereafter now, are you feeling included? And there are some environments where you go and you realize socially, they might not be inviting you to this thing, but everybody else on the team was invited informally. So, did they just not think of you, or is it purposely that they're not inviting you? It happens in the classroom as well. Sometimes in law, especially, there'll be emails sent out by professors or by tutors to classes to say, we're having a revision class for the exam, whatever. And somehow your email has just not been included, but every other person in the class has. Is it that they just didn't recognize you being in the class because they've overlooked the black person, or is it just a mistake? Sometimes it's really hard to navigate a lot of those spaces and seeing that, okay, I am not included in something like this. How do I approach it? How do I kind of ensure that I get as much out of the experience and not let that stop me from being who I am and getting as much from being in Oxford as possible? But it is unfortunate, but it's something that we are all very aware of, that race just plays into a lot of our interactions on a daily basis being here at Oxford.
Would you say it is intimidating to be in white majority spaces?
I would say it can be. And so, as I was saying, it depends on how you decide to approach your experience and how I think also your personality is. So, me personally, I'm not intimidated quite easily. I would have to be, I guess, forcefully excluded. They would have to outright be making racist remarks and so on for me to be. And even then, I would just probably take it as an argument and fight back. But that's just my personality, that, I approach things more with strength rather than kind of saying, okay, well, if I'm not here, let me walk away or so on. Then, I approach it differently. It depends on, I think, each person and how they approach situation. And sometimes it does make sense to kind of walk away and say, if I'm not wanted, then move across. But if you're in a classroom, like, on the BCL, I can't just do that. That might affect my grades. I have to say, no, why was I not included? Do not let this happen again. My email is this, and that, and you have to come kind of strength wise. But I have seen it intimidate fellow colleagues and fellow students, and it really does affect them. It can take a weight on your mental health if every day you're in an environment where you feel like everyone is saying you're not supposed to be there, and may actually say it outright. Why is this student here? Why did they even let you in? They might make a joke at the pub, like, who let you into this school, whatever, and so on. And I've seen it affect friends where we've had to kind of talk to them and say, hey, this is what you're going through and we understand completely, but you can't let that stop your progress. You can't let that, influence this. And that's why it's important to have the community, because it can be intimidating. It can be stressful. It can be a lot on your mental health. And when you take a break, like when I went home for Christmas, I really realized just how much I missed being a regular human, just walking in the street and not having people look at me like, wow, like, who is this person walking through the street, or so on. Just being able to just be comfortable, go and buy a meal and not have to worry about like the attitude being against someone who is black coming into the establishment or so on. And so it's important to have the community where you can feel comfortable and take breaks from it, because it can be a lot for sure.
Tell me a bit about class, because I know there's racism, but there's also classism, given the fact that Oxford is indeed an elite space. Yeah. And, many of the students will be coming from upper class backgrounds. So talk to us a bit about the whole class divide.
For sure. And so I think, class and race work together a lot, because obviously a lot of us who are black also come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And so we haven't had the type of resources. We don't have rich parents who are, millionaires. Class still kind of ties into race, but even beyond that, class still continues because a lot of the barriers we experience are because of financial issues. And so, a project might come up or an experience might come up where I would really benefit from, but if financially I don't have the backing, my parents aren't just sitting on, I don't have a big trust fund to kind of just access, then that can impede how I then interact with other classmates. And so you might find that they're not willingly excluding you, but after a while, they're doing activities that require you to have more money. And so, if I'm invited on a trip and it costs £500 just to get the adequate clothing to go on the trip, and we're not even talking about the flights yet or the accommodation and so on, then there's no way that me coming from Jamaica, I can afford that. I'm here on a scholarship. Without the scholarship, I wouldn't have even been here, much less to have extra money on top of that to do some of these experiences. And so class then is the next barrier. So even after they're saying, okay, we're wide open, we're inclusive, then you have that next barrier. Okay, I really still can't hang with this, or I really still can't even do a school project because it requires or it just assumes that I have £2,000 sitting down in order to kind of access that. And not all the funding around the school is really equally given. Sometimes you still get those rich kids that get the funding from the college and it just continues and you don't get access. So class is that next barrier, I think, that even after we've solved any racial issues, being in an elite space kind of like this, where all of them are coming from private school together, all of them went to boarding school, went to Eton, went to, these different schools that just, they're kind of surrounded by money their whole life and they really don't know anything different, then it does create another barrier, unfortunately, for us kind of integrating as much as I guess the regular student from Britain would have.
Tell me a bit about your support system, because I know you said you would have made some Caribbean friends and so on. How important has your support system been to you being seen in this sort of environment?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's quite important. The first few that we met were on the same scholarship as me, and so every year the Caribbean gets two scholarships. So you have Jamaica and the Commonwealth Caribbean. So I have me, and then my year there was a Belizean girl who also got the scholarship, and so we became close immediately. Even before getting to Oxford, we were messaging and saying, "Wow, we're expecting this," and we could relate to a lot of things from that. Then when we got here, we also, or a little before actually, we met the Bermudan Rhodes Scholar as well, who that year happened to be black, and usually Bermudan Rhodes Scholar is white, so that also helped. And so we had this kind of Caribbean trio that built early on, where we were very compatible with each other. We all were very aware of our background and very aware of the privileges that we wouldn't have had in comparison to others, and how we were going to navigate this space to get the most of it and support each other. And then from that, now we had a few also from the US who were either black or maybe also from a Latin background. We're also diverse. And then we also had a few from Africa as well. Black Africans, Indian Africans who we could also relate to. And so that built a nice community. This year, a couple of us are also on the executive of BARS, which is the Black Association of Rhodes Scholars. And so we're trying to continuously build that network for each black student that is coming in. And that has been important as well, just through the kind of activities, whether we're having a barbecue or we can grill some chicken outside, which is just something you're not always getting in the British kind of culture, or we can try and plan a breakfast day where we make some dumplings, some ackee and saltfish, some codfish coming from Bermuda, or we make some tacos and some wraps from Belize and all that. So kind of just having a nice mix of all of it together. That support, even just in a general weekly basis, is just so healthy for you mentally to kind of just get that break. And also it means that you can go to them when something is, pressing. I experienced an issue of racism today. I need to talk to somebody to vent about it, or it's just going to kind of just get built up and pent up energy, you know what I mean? So you get that kind of community, and it's necessary. There are always people, I think, in each environment. You just have to seek them out. There are other people that are struggling. I found people late in the year, sometimes some black British males in the latter part of last year, that because of the pandemic, we didn't get those interactions. And when I found them, we're just like, wow, where have we been, for the whole year? but one is isolated over this section, one is isolated over this section, and you just never get to interact. And when we finally found each other, we could bond over so many different things, from music to, the things that we were watching, the schoolwork, the environment. There was so much to bond on and create like a lifelong friendship just from that. So it's really important to create that community. Some of it is created on its own, but you also kind of seek out to ensure that you find those people on the same wavelength to do a lot with. Yeah, and that's just really important, being in a place like this, for sure.
Have you been able to make any white British friends who were able to embrace you and show you aspects of their culture and so on?
Yeah, I have, and it's important, I think, when looking at the whole situation, to know that one perspective, or at least the general perspective that you get here, doesn't represent everyone in the population, right? So I've made great British friends here, Irish friends, some from Europe as well. We're talking Greece, from Slovenia, just from all over, Netherlands and so on, Paris. Just, there's so many different people that are here in a mix of culture as well, and that you just have to be smart about sifting through. So I made a lot of the British male friends that I made were either from the course, who were people who I realized, okay, they're a little bit different. They are asking me questions that others wouldn't ask, asking me about race, asking me about being in this environment, asking me how they can support, how they can be more helpful or mindful of certain things and so on. Or others might have been through sports. Like, I have good white male friends from the rugby team who were very welcoming, and the camaraderie was really good. And they saw you just literally as a human, rather than saying, okay, there's this black guy that we need to entertain or so on. And you could see a difference between them and others. And you could be like, okay, this one I can entertain. If they invite me out, I can be comfortable meeting them at the pub or so on. And now on the NBA, very good white American male friends, or white British friends as well, who understand the whole context. And you can just be real with a lot of the time, that they don't see like, okay, they're just talking to a black friend. They see you just as a friend, and that's important, in the whole context of just understanding that, okay, our aim is equality, rather than being seen as different from a different culture, whatever. And just that understanding, or that love for different cultures, is important as well. And so you do have people in the population who are there, and you can make genuine friendships regardless.
What aspects of British culture have you come to appreciate?
I think one of the things that I appreciate a lot is the banter. So just how they interact with each other. I think it's something that isn't far off, I think, from in the Caribbean, to be honest, where we negatively kind of say something to someone, but it's us still saying how much we love them. But a lot of people might like deeply kind of like philosophically and psychologically kind of assess it as, oh, we have this toxic kind of culture where we might beat on each other. But it's the similar type of thing. Like, they'll see you and be like, oh my gosh, why are you even here? Like, who let this man in, or whatever? And it ends with a hug, like, you're really happy to see the person and so on. It's just that British banter where it's like, oh, you got an 85. Oh, I guess they just give everyone these grades nowadays or whatever and so on. But you're really telling them like, yo, I'm really proud of you. That's amazing. And so it's coming to understand some of those things. Not everyone, I think, manages it very well, because it might seem negative on that side if you don't really understand it properly. But I've been enjoying like just interacting with them, hitting back. It requires that kind of wittiness, that remark that can just be quick, and they're very thoughtful in terms of like, they think into their responses a lot, and it just happens. And so if you're not there, you might get lost. And I really appreciate that, like, just that quick thinking, being witty with the remarks, just hitting very quickly and so on. And it makes you bond in such a very different kind of atmosphere. A lot of it also has been just like bonding with like football, rugby culture here as well, which is really big. I'm a Manchester United fan, so I'm always watching games, talking. They'll go to the pub and have a drink and watch a match and so on, and you get to bond with everyone there. I saw my first like live football game last year, and I'm hoping to see another one like next month with some friends. But like, that is just such a thing that's integrated into the culture here, that from us in the Caribbean, seen on a screen, you'll never appreciate it as much as being there when the games are being played, where everyone is screaming out at 2 a.m., in the middle of the streets just celebrating their team's win and so on. It's very interesting to kind of observe and be a part of that. But yeah, overall, it's just a very interesting thing to kind of appreciate and be included in and kind of enjoy. Whatever your interests are, I think that you can find something that kind of aligns to that, and then enjoy it within the culture for sure.
Do you like British food?
For the most part, I wouldn't say British food is my favorite. I remember I had a fish and chips when I just came, and I told them that it let me down. But most British people told me that I tried it at the wrong place. That I shouldn't have had it in Oxford. That there are certain special places in the UK that I need to try it. So I still told them when they carry me there, I will give it another try. But for the most part, I've been seeking to either cook with my friends or kind of there's two Caribbean places in Oxford that I try a lot, and I'll go there and try and get some Caribbean food most of the time and so on. But for the most part, British food is not my favorite, and to be honest, most British people wouldn't say it's their favorite either. I think that the last time we checked, their national dish um was it not butter chicken, but I think it's something that is actually like from India, and that is like their national dish for the UK, which was quite shocking to me. But I think it is their admission that even their own food to them is not the best, and at least they can admit that.
Because I know there are another place that is really renowned for any sort of indigenous cuisine.
Yeah.
So,
The good thing is, I think in London especially, they get the mix of cultures because of so many people kind of immigrating to London. So you get that African culture, you get good Caribbean food, you get good Indian food, you get good Chinese food. So it's a nice mix in London. In Oxford, you're really getting a British life. You're getting roast potatoes, you're getting some beef, you're getting maybe a chicken here with just like some green beans, kind of like a little roast veg. It's not that appealing. It's not, especially coming from the Caribbean, not the most tasty thing. And so I guess it takes some time getting used to, or as some friends do, they don't get used to it at all and just cook for themselves. Yeah.
right. Have you been able to do any traveling within the UK to see other parts of England?
No. Yeah, I mean, not as much as I think I wish to, because last year, especially on the BCL, it was quite an intensive program, and also the pandemic was going on. But this year, this academic year, we did do a few. Been to Birmingham, been to Reading, been to Manchester as well. Trying to just do some of the bigger ones, and then after that, we have some plans to try and look at some other ones. We went to Scotland as well, a part of the UK, and that was quite nice. Quite cold at the time, so we're hoping to revisit. But there's so many different kind of aspects of British culture as well, or UK culture when you go to different towns. So it's kind of important to try and to try and find those different aspects and search for them. So this year we've kind of been a little bit more intentional of saying, okay, let's make a trip to Cornwall one day. I went to the Isle of Wight with some friends a few months ago, and just spent a weekend. And you have to take a ferry, you drive onto the ferry and then take a ferry across, and we spent the day just kind of driving around, exploring, and then came back across and so on. So those are very different than a London or Oxford. And I've been to the other side, which is what we call Cambridge, because we don't need to call their name. But we've been over there, and it's okay. Not as great as Oxford, but it's okay as well. But yeah, so different aspects of the UK are good to experience, and we try as much as we can to kind of just explore that, and then hopefully also explore Europe as much as possible, because the ease of transportation, it's so much easier to move to another European country and visit than it is even for us in the Caribbean, especially in terms of how much it costs. When you look at the flight between Jamaica and Trinidad, or to St. Lucia and all that stuff, that's really a barrier for us. Whereas here, they sometimes have deals where they can get a 20-30 pound flight to Paris, and just go for the weekend and come back. So we've been trying to kind of plan ahead and use some of those opportunities to get more out of the culture overall here in Europe.
As we are wrapping up, I want you to give us some advice. There are young people who may be interested in pursuing studies in the UK, particularly law. And I want you to give them some advice, on what to expect and what they should do if they would like to emulate you in the future.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is finding what it is that you're passionate about. And so sometimes it means that you're passionate about not even an area of law, but about a certain skill. So, I was passionate about advocacy a lot before I then kind of found the passion for international law and the commercial side of international work and so on. So, a lot of those things can change over time. And so I feel like I might not want it too fixated. A lot of people come and they talk and they're just like, I'm very passionate about international law. And then when you ask and dig deeper, they maybe were more passionate about a job that travels or more passionate about some treaty work, or like they didn't know exactly what it was in international law. It could have been arbitration, it could have been international criminal work, it could have been international human rights, and they're not really that sure as yet. And that is totally fine. It's so important to just try and kind of interrogate those interests and find where you actually perform well, find where you enjoy yourself. I think that's the starting point. Try to like pursue those interests and just become the best at it, because you really can only become the best after you've chosen something that is a path for you. And so, me looking on, I found a lot of persons who are mentors who I look up to or who accomplish things that I said, oh, I'd love to do something like that. But it's important to know that one, your journey might not be the same, and two, you really can't be them. You can aim to do certain things that maybe they have done or go on similar paths, but you should never really aim to be someone else. You should really look at the bigger picture and find where it is that your purpose is being fulfilled. And so once I've kind of bought into that idea of finding what my purpose is, I've been way more flexible with the path that I might take. And so you experience failures and realize that, okay, this failure might feed into whatever my path and my journey should be. So when I was applying for the Rhodes Scholarship, I didn't get it in the first year. And that's when I went to the CCJ. And now I wouldn't give that up, because that CCJ experience and living in Trinidad and integrating and being a part of, that Caribbean regional work while working at the highest court in the Caribbean, that was so integral in my development as not only a lawyer, but overall now when I'm going into a bigger scheme and at a bigger sphere working in London in the future and so on, that I now have this grounding of the Caribbean and how our legal systems work, and say, okay, maybe this is what I want to learn in order to bring back, or this is the kind of area I didn't enjoy working in, but I'd love to work in this and try this. And so a lot of it as a young lawyer is experiencing as much as you can and building that broad foundation for what the rest of your career will look like. A lot of us look at it and say, I need to be here in the next 5 years. But realistically, you have 30, 40 years, maybe even 50 years of working in your profession, depending on what you decide to do. So you have such a long time to kind of develop what you want to do and become good at it and well known, that we might be rushing it a lot of the times without realizing. And for specifically people who want to study in like Oxford or Cambridge, I would say one, make sure that you really know the programs that you're going into, that you well research them, you speak to the people who have been on the program, if anyone has, and then after that, you figure out if that's the program for you. So a person who, for example, wants to do a lot of international law and wants to work at the ICJ might see what I'm doing and saying, okay, they definitely want to do the BCL at Oxford. But in speaking to people, might realize that actually it's better they go to Cambridge for international law, and specifically that program and how they actually push out a lot of the international theories and so on. It might be better for their development if that's purely what they want to do. Like if there's not a touch of commercial in there, they just want to be purely in international law or so. So there's a lot of those kind of conversations that need to happen so that people can really know where they should go. And then from there, be relentless in the pursuit of your goal. Like there is no other, I think, thing that contributes to your success than just being so set on achieving something that there's no failure that would prevent you from getting there. I knew that I was going to come to the UK, and that's something I even told them when I went for the second Rhodes interview, when they asked me and they said, what have you learned from the failure? What has happened this whole year? And I practically said to them that whether I get the scholarship or not, I'm going to go and I'm going to study in the UK. So at that point, I'd already gotten over the fact that, okay, I didn't get to the first round. I might not even get it now, and you have to put aside the ego. I might go and I might do this again, and everyone is there like, wow, someone is going for this interview again. I might hear everyone go, oh gosh, he lost again and whatever and so on. 2 times, that must be rough. You get away from the ego and just know that, listen, I'm going to pursue every avenue to get here. And so if it's not this, then maybe I might apply for Sheevan. If it's not that, I might apply for Commonwealth. If it's not that, I might apply for the scholarships at the school. I sent out numerous applications, and each stage of my life, I sent out numerous applications. So when people see it kind of looking like it's this straight path, along it, there are like 20 failed applications at every stage that people don't hear about. But that you have to build this grit that just flows off you, like water just running off the back of the duck. It just flows off so easy that you get this, and you say, okay, well, that was God shutting the door. No, I'm going to move to something else. And, he wants me to be somewhere else. And you look at it with a different perspective. And so for young lawyers, I'd say, especially coming from the Caribbean, there are so many obstacles that people like to focus on that it takes for us to get to somewhere like this. But instead of that, I think focus on how you build your journey. You build yourself as the best candidate, become as best as you can, build that foundation, and then when you set that goal, you just work towards it as hard as possible, regardless of what the failures are, regardless of what obstacles may come up, regardless of people discouraging you. Never give up once you know that that is what is for you. And eventually you definitely get there and look back and be like, okay, wow, I was actually able to accomplish what I had set out to do.
That's great advice. And I like the way that you said, we can't imitate someone else's life. What we can do is really follow the principles that they would have utilized to incorporate into our own lives and our own journeys and discovering our purpose. But I think that would be a good point for us to bring things to a close. Final words to you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I think, things like this are so important to kind of have us having these conversations. I mean, this by itself shows us just even integration at work, because we met each other in debating at Kville, during that year. And so it shows just how much we can have and how much we can build from certain experiences. So just for other people in the Caribbean, I'm encouraging you, working hard is quite important. The other part of it is also just being very smart about your choices. When you have job offers, you have opportunities, seek after those that help to build you as much as possible and help to curate that journey for your life and finding where your purpose is. Because if we have in the Caribbean as much people as possible actually fulfilling their purpose, that is the only way that we can actually build as a region, build our countries, build our island, and overall contribute to the growth in the world. So, thanks for having me so much. And I really hope that this is encouraging to all the listeners out there to really find their purpose and do as best as they can.
Great, Samuel. It really was indeed a pleasure having you on the show today. I wish you all of the very best in all of your studies. This has brought us to the end of another episode of the Legal Corner podcast series. Remember to check us out on social media. We look forward to hearing from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Corner podcast series. For more information, please visit us at our Facebook or Instagram pages or send your comments to thelegalcornerpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.